Welcome, everybody, and welcome to this week's Irish Food Trade Connect Conversations. I'm delighted today to have Karl Fielding with me, who worked with lawyers in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and developed the first set of non-alcoholic beverages. Something where, I kind of have a passion myself as a non-drinker. So when I saw what Karl has done in that sector, I said I wanted to have a chat with him. Welcome, Karl.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Margaret.
Karl, tell me a bit about yourself and your background.
Well, it's been a long career, mostly in FMCG. So I think, I started off doing a lot of brand and marketing roles in Heineken. Um, Very boring job for a 20-something-year-old working in beer,
I
sponsorships
can
in
imagine,
music,
yeah. I'd say you never had a
doing
night out
oxygen,
in
doing
it.
electric picnic. Oh, poor me. Champions League sponsorships as well. So no, unbelievable, start to my career in terms of, understanding brand marketing from what I consider to be one of the best branding companies in the world. And I've stayed in FMCG pretty much my whole career. So I was with Kellogg's for a while. While I was with Kellogg's, I got a phone call about a role in Dubai. So I ended up working for a dairy company in Dubai. So not the kind of the glamour of the city lights that you would associate with Dubai. I was working out in a farm with about 12,000 cows as my neighbours in the
Right.
outskirts of Dubai. And I was part of a marketing department that was set up, all paddies. So our marketing manager, Irish, and three brand managers, including myself. And I was there for about a year. And yeah, like it was, an interesting kind of start to my time in Dubai, especially because I was expecting to be on the beach a lot, but I was out in the desert more so than anything else. But that was traditional brand marketing as well that I was doing for them, and we kind of relaunched their packaging and redesigned a lot of delivery around the brand, introduced new products and whatnot. But I was back into booze not long after that, so I ended up working for a company called African and Eastern. So they would be next to the other distributor, MMI, probably the biggest distributors in the Middle East for alcohol. And that's a fascinating category to be in, especially in the Middle East, because you're working in countries that are, under Islamic rules. So you need to be really sensitive in terms of how you market alcohol brands. It is considered to be something that's necessary to have in Dubai, in Qatar, in Bahrain to attract tourists. But in terms of how you market those brands, it is a dark market. There's no TV, radio, above the line advertising. Everything has to be done below the line within the venues that you're operating in. And retail is heavily controlled as well. So I was with, I think, when you're working in a duopoly, you've got two major distributors. You can cut it in half in terms of the drinks brands you're working in. So when I started off, I was working with William Grant's, which is the Scottish company that have Hendrick's Gin, Glenfiddich, Tullamore Dew, and I was working on Jägermeister as well. And that was a lot of fun because when you get into the venues, you're pretty much, you're only limited by your imagination. So I did some amazing kind of marketing campaigns. One that kind of sticks out for me was with Hendrick's. So we did a campaign called Cucumber Day. So you're not allowed to advertise alcohol brands. So what we did was we created this day called Cucumber Day. So all the iconography around the campaign was very much related to Hendrick's, but the campaign itself meant that in venues on one particular day, if you bring in a cucumber, you get a free Hendrick's and tonic. So we had people in bars and restaurants all over the city walking around with cucumbers in their handbags, in their, jacket pockets and whatnot, to come and collect their free Hendrick's G&T. And the next day we had to kind of, ship all of these to a food bank, to be responsible in terms of how we're using all these cucumbers. We collected 15,000 cucumbers. And
Oh my.
we had this on a Wednesday night. So let's say it's kind of, wouldn't be like one of the busiest nights. And, we had venues that were doing same kind of revenue as a weekend night because we were pulling in so many people with this free G&T. So that, had some memorable campaigns with that. Then I moved back into beer, and I was managing the beer department and working with, AB InBev that have Corona, Stella Artois, Budweiser, and you're doing amazing brand activations around World Cup with Budweiser, Corona Sunsets, working with Peroni, working with Guinness, which I was dying to work on, and I finally got the opportunity to work on Guinness because it's a brand that's close to my heart and I have huge respect for. And then after all that experience working alcohol, you're talking well over a decade working in alcohol, then I've been working on Bulmers with the export director, and he was moving over to this company called Lyres. So Lyres is an Australian company. It originates from from Melbourne, where the two founders are from, and the name is based on the lyre bird. So the lyre bird is a famous songbird in Australia, and it mimics the sounds of other birds. It's kind of to use as a camouflage. So it's trying to hiding away from, potential dangerous animal. It'll mimic the sound of another bird. So, this other animal will think it's something else. So the metaphor for that is that lyres is mimicking spirits. So lyres can do a non-alcoholic version of gin, whiskey, vermouth, any of the spirits that you can think of, amaretti, all the kind of different kind of spirits. They've got probably, in its portfolio at one stage they had about 18 different non-alcoholic spirits. They even did a non-alcoholic version of Baijiu in China when we launched there. So very extensive kind of range of non-alcoholic spirits, and basically what it's giving bartenders is it's an analog of flavors that they know how to use already. So if one is making a Negroni, they know, you're using your gin, you're using your Campari, and you're using your vermouth. If you've got a non-alcoholic version of that, then you're applying the same mixing skills as a mixologist to making that cocktail, but you're just doing it in a non-alcoholic format. So that's kind of where it was, the simplicity of this as a kind of as a concept was really what resonated with the bartenders all over the world when we launched. So I took up the role with Lyres, and I was really kind of enthused by not just the opportunity that I could see globally, but specifically in the Middle East region, because the vast majority of the region don't drink for religious reasons. So I saw that as a real nice challenge to go after. So here I am working in Dubai for 6-7 years, focusing pretty much predominantly on expats, and now you have an opportunity to target a completely different audience, and you need to do it in a very sensitive way, in a very careful way, in terms of alcohol is haram, but really what we're trying to do is we want to present this as a really sophisticated mixed drink, that is an elevation of a mocktail rather than talking about its kind of associations with alcohol. So that brought me into places like Saudi Arabia, where they don't serve alcohol at all, and you've got kind of bars and restaurants that are popping up around the country since the economy started opening up in the last kind of 5 or 6 years. So it was just an amazing opportunity, and I've really loved it. And I think the category is still in its infancy, and the growth opportunities within it are huge.
That's an unbelievable amount of information. And I'm going to take you back, because you've had some amazing experiences in your career. One of the things there you said about the advertising of alcohol, is it under the table? How is it, because of the religious beliefs, how is that advertising done? Is that do you have to kind of do that in the like what they call a grey market, or what way is that worked?
So I'll start with retail because that's the easiest one to answer. So retail is very restricted to the distributor that I worked for and the other distributor. So you're working in a duopoly essentially. They are the only ones allowed to sell alcohol in retail, and they've got about 20-25 stores each around the city. Now, you wouldn't know they're alcohol stores when you look at the branding around them. It's very much the sign and logo of the business. There would be no imagery of wine, beer, spirits, or anything like that. And when you go in there, you know, it's very much unmistakably an alcohol retail store. But the only reason you'd be in there in the first place is to buy alcohol. And you need to have a license as well. And if it shows that you are Muslim, then you would not be allowed a license. So as a Muslim person, there is no, there is no, possibility of you being in there by mistake because you need a license to buy there in the first place. And you would know specifically that this store, as soon as you walk in, is serving alcohol only. So, and these are not in a major prominent high street places, so you wouldn't see them in the middle of a shopping mall or out in the kind of high street. They're kind of tucked away in kind of, in more discreet locations in neighborhoods around the city. And look, then when it comes to licensed venues, you have licensed venues and you have non-licensed venues. The licensed venues are the ones that have a license to sell alcohol around the city. Now, predominantly, there would be bars in probably the back end of a hotel or the basement of a hotel, and then something more exclusive as a kind of a fine dining restaurant that also serves drink at the top of the hotel. Now, the vast majority of these places are known to be licensed or should be known to be licensed, and people can check pretty easily, in terms of looking at their menus in advance. So again, it's not in your face like the non-licensed restaurants where you can just walk in off the street. None of them are allowed to sell alcohol, and they're very visible and very more family orientated and open, and you can see everything that's going on within those places. Whereas for the alcohol serving venues, it's very much more discreet. So it's done, to be culturally sensitive in terms of, not being in the face of Muslims and, not being in terms of having any kind of potentially antisocial kind of behavior that is be visible to these people because they are kind of quite tucked away. But to be honest with you, in saying antisocial behavior, it's a very strict country in terms of how it's ruled, and you step out of line, people know that you need to behave in accordingly, and you wouldn't see much antisocial behavior anyway within the city.
I suppose it's important for anyone maybe that might be exporting out there to understand that. And I suppose I had one instance years ago when I was traveling. I had a long day's work, and it was the start of the Ramadan. And of course I did, like, even though I knew, and but I just, because it's so culturally different. I think it was in Egypt I was. And I remember going up to the bar and asking for a glass of red wine. Oh my God, I was looked at as if I was like the three heads. And
Yeah,
I really felt it, like, and there was
yeah,
groups of men but sitting down having a drink, but not a woman in sight.
yeah,
And I'd had nothing to eat all day. I had, I was so tired. All I wanted was a glass of red wine. And it was, so you can really feel it when you're there. And I suppose that's even why the non-alcoholic, when you say it kind of like, and it mixes the same and it kind of tastes the same, but it's non-alcoholic. So it brings that kind of um feeling maybe of, I don't know, inclusion or something. Maybe, I'm not sure, but it's a
yeah.
huge
It's
step
like,
to take in a market, isn't it? It's a huge step.
no, like I think for me, anything to be successful, you need to be able to boil it down and make it simplistic. And you hit the nail on the head. It's about inclusivity. So I think a lot of people that, from a religious point of view don't drink doesn't mean that they want to segregate themselves from other people that do drink. They still want to be in these top end fine dining restaurants. And I think sometimes, prior to the likes of Lyres coming into the region, it's a kind of a bit of a it's a bit of a tick box exercise, and the mocktails, the dreaded mocktail, we all kind of hate that word because it's kind of like a little bit of
Oh, we do.
a
I hate that
throwaway
word.
kind of,
Yeah.
your Shirley Temples or your kind of, really badly kind of mixed style of mojito. And when you're out in the financial district with in a fine dining restaurant with your colleagues, and you're all working in a very, exclusive bank or whatever it might be, and two or three people aren't drinking and the other people are drinking some kind of nicely mixed cocktail, whether it be a mojito or sorry, a Manhattan or a Negroni or whatever it might be, the other people might want to, be convivial and feel included and want to have something similar. So why not offer a non-alcoholic version of that? And I think some of the best restaurants that have actually implemented non-alcoholic on their menu, it's kind of like a seamless transition. So what you might have is you'll have a Negroni, which is for, let's say, €15, and then you'll have a little asterisk like it, like you would say, like a vegetarian version, and then
Hmm.
it's NA non-alcoholic. So it's very discreetly done, but it's done in such a way that everybody is drinking. Like if everybody wants to be cheersing or drinking the same thing, or you want to have like say a non-alcoholic champagne because you're celebrating, I think it's a very seamless experience if you can offer something, that's very similar to what everybody else is drinking, just in a non-alcoholic format. And that also, not just in terms of the craft of the drink and the effort that the mixologist puts into it, but it also kind of stems into the glassware they use as well. Nicer glassware, crystal glassware, and it all just gives you that sense that I'm in a nice restaurant, I'm enjoying something nice that has been kind of crafted like nicely together by the bartender. And I feel like I'm part of a group rather than, sticking out like a sore thumb drinking a Shirley Temple or a Coca-Cola.
Yeah, and like I totally agree with you. And I don't know what you think, and maybe I'll ask you what you think actually, and I'll tell you then what I think. But what do you think of it in Ireland for non-alcoholic options versus the rest of the world of what you've seen? What are you seeing? What do you think?
Um, well, look, I think the big beer companies have been very clever with non-alcoholic. Non-alcoholic brings them into places that, let's say, the powers that be in the country wouldn't allow them normally to be in. When you talk about a few years ago, there was a big kind of, push by the government to, reduce the amount of alcohol sponsorship that is going on. So non-alcoholic allows them to, still promote the master brand, but also do it in a way that allows them to associate with sports. So I think that's been very clever on their part. Um, but at the same time, I think they all see this as just as being an opportunity as well. So I think, as a beer drinker myself, I would like to see more draft options around the country, and I think that is growing, which is a good thing. I think Heineken have done a great job. I think Guinness have done a really good job. I think both of them, in terms of the quality of the liquid versus the alcoholic version, it's as close as you could get. Like I remember my father, like when I was younger, drinking non-alcoholic beers, there was one available called Caliber, and it was horrendous. Like it was literally the worst thing you could ever drink. So the options there in beer are great. Like I said, I think in spirits, it's more limited. Um, I would say if you go to quality cocktail bars, there's probably more of a variety of what's available there, but it tends to be just your kind of straight non-alcoholic gins, and that's pretty much it. So I would like to see, I think, if you think of popular cocktails that are popular in general, an Aperol Spritz, they should be doing a non-alcoholic Aperol Spritz, and that's pretty much easy to do. If you swap out the Aperol for something like a Lyre's Italian Spritz. And then really, and I don't think this is the fault of hospitality, I think the quality of the non-alcoholic wines is still not at the level of where spirits have got to and where beer has got to. So I think there's a huge gap in the market for really quality non-alcoholic wine. Um, and then outside of that, we're just specifically talking about non-alcoholic, but there's the shift towards low ABV cocktails and low ABV drinks is really building momentum, especially over the UK. Um, I have a friend that's working on doing some consultancy on a brand called Quarterproof. So they basically produce a distillation of, a tequila or a gin or a vodka or a whiskey to 60%, and then they quarter it down to 15. So it's called Quarterproof, and it's 15% ABV. So that's compared to most, spirits, which would be 37.5 or 40% ABV. So significantly less alcohol within that. So you could argue that, instead of just nursing one gin and tonic towards the night, you could have maybe three or four, and that would give you a kind of a convivial night without having a major hangover the next morning, or to be kind of still, let's say, compos mentis that evening. So that's definitely a gap. I think, from a supplier side, wine needs to be improved on. And I think from hospitality, more options in general, around cocktails, and lower ABV, drinks as well, whether it be low ABV beers, wines, and spirits.
I totally agree with you. And I've had some experiences on it where, say you're going to something and they have an event and they have the glasses of wine or glasses of champagne the minute you come in the door. But if you don't drink that, it's a glass of water you get. And at one, I actually didn't even get a glass. It was a bottle of water, just like,
Yeah.
as in, like, I had to ask for a glass. So I think for me as a non-drinker, I find it really difficult to navigate. Like, is there anything else for me to drink? Only water and Coke? Is there, like, and
Yeah.
it is that kind of thing, But I think, as you say, I notice it more in hospitality. I suppose I don't. It would be more in the kind of maybe being out and about setting rather than bring it in home, because I wouldn't even go into a retail and even think of that. I just wouldn't. But if I'm out and about at events and stuff, and especially I do find it for work things that I go to, it would be nice to have that inclusiveness piece. But maybe the actual, as you say, the quality of the product isn't just there, or there isn't any good options, because any of these mocktails that I've tasted, they're like a fruit juice. I'll be honest with you. There's nothing.
Yeah.
I might as well get the orange juice out of the fridge there and just pour that and throw something else. And I'm not being disrespectful to anyone that's making mocktails, but it's just not there. It's just not there. So that's what I even find now, trying to navigate the social scene as a non-drinker.
Yeah, no, look, you're dead right. And look, the genesis of Liars was very much from the situation you found yourself in work functions. So Mark Livings, who created Liars, he was running an advertising agency in Sydney, and all his clients were drinks companies. So he's working with, Bacardi, he's working with Brown Forman, with Jack Daniels and whatnot. And all the functions he'd be out with the clients, you're trying to impress them and schmooze them. It involves a lot of drink. And now his drink of choice was always cocktails. And he was like, wouldn't it be great to have just something that makes me feel like I'm getting a nice kind of a bourbon experience to the cocktail, versus something that is just juice mixed with syrup, mixed with lemonade or whatever it might be. So that's where the genesis came from. And I think in hospitality we need to shift. Like a colleague of mine in Saudi Arabia has the phrase, you can't take beverage costs to the bank, you can only take profit to the bank. So a lot of the operators think about beverage costs. So if you imagine when they're looking at the beverage cost of an average mocktail, which might be a bit of juice, a bit of soft drink, and a bit of syrup, it's going to be next to nothing in terms of what the beverage cost is, a euro or something like that. But something that's non-premium and that basic, you're going to be charging 5-6 euros max for something like that kind of drink. Or it might be like a My Wadi and water, and sure, that's for nothing as well. But you're not going to be charging a high price for that at all. Now, if you get into a beverage cost with a non-alcoholic cocktail, it could be potentially, instead of €1, it might be €3. But I think a lot of people out there, when they go to the fine dining restaurants or cocktail bars, they will be willing to pay more for a better cocktail experience in a nicer glass and a nicer mixed cocktail. So if you're bumping that up, say if you normally you'll work off a kind of let's say an 80 index to a cocktail, so 20% less than what a cocktail would be. So if you're looking at a cocktail that's €15, you're looking at maybe between €10 and €12 for a non-alcoholic version of that. The cash margin you're going to make off that cocktail is going to be far greater. Plus, the chances of them buying multiple versions of that cocktail, because they might be going on a round with other people, or everybody's buying a drink at the same time, you're talking multiples of that cash margin that customer is going to make. So it's not just about kind of ticking the box and giving something for, oh no, we have to do something for the vegetarians, we have to do something for the non-drinkers. It's like, no, this audience is growing, and there's an opportunity to make some good, decent margin off this audience as well that are willing to pay more for it. So, you know, that's the kind of the commercial mindset that we were trying to get our customers in when we were selling this in. It wasn't just about you need to give more choice. It's actually you can prop up your your P&L greatly by actually offering a more premium option in this space.
Isn't it crazy? Like, isn't it? Because you're so right. You would pay it if you're out in in a restaurant or anything like that. You would pay it. There's no reason why you wouldn't. If it tasted right and the quality of it was right and the service of
Mm.
it was right, there is no reason that you wouldn't pay for it. So it's a pure missed opportunity commercially.
Yeah.
Like, so there's definitely a huge a huge piece of work, I think. And are you just seeing that? Like, do you just see that in Ireland, or have you seen it in other markets, or do you think we're lagging behind here, or how do you see it?
We're we're a very beer centric country when it comes to alcohol, and like I said, I think Heineken and Guinness as the benchmarks within lager and stout have done an amazing job. So I don't think I think we're probably ahead of a lot of markets in that space. Um, like I said, I just think in cocktails in general, we are kind of lagging behind in terms of the options out there. Um, and I think just like people need to see this as operators needs to see this as a footfall driver too as well as not just something that just you hide at the back of your menu, because I can sense when I speak to people in general that don't drink, there's a sense of trepidation of not fitting in when they go out to a restaurant or a bar, because they're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Oh, the thing you get in Ireland is if it's a woman's not drinking, are you pregnant? Or, this kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
it is.
If
Yeah,
you're
I'm
drinking
taking
a Coke or
antibiotics. Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So, having more of these options actually, if you've got people that are just, you know what, I just don't want the kind of the conversation I need to have with people. Why aren't you not drinking and all of that? This actually drives that person into the venue rather than sitting at home. They're actually, buying from retail, they're actually in venues. So, and the other thing as well is like we've become so restrictive in Ireland in terms of how we manage alcohol. So, one of the big footfall drivers in Dubai, for instance, is happy hour. Now, happy hour has been taken out of this country since I think the early 2000s. So, but why not do a happy hour for non-alcoholic drinkers? Because the reason why happy hour is banned in this country is because the government deem it to be something, and probably rightly so as well, deem it as something that, you'll go in for an hour and you'll drink all you can in that space of time because you're in a rush to get the best value you can out of, what you're drinking. But you're not going to get that situation at all in non-alcoholic. So I think hospitality operators need to see this as not just a tick box exercise, but actually a footfall driver incremental to their business, because it's not going to cannibalize anything. It's actually going to drive more margin versus tea, coffees, and mixed juices. Um, and they should push out their boat in terms of how they activate around this as well, in terms of driving footfall.
yeah. It's so very true, because I think it might get more non-drinkers out of their house and into social spaces, which
Absolutely.
is which is what we all want to be doing.
Yeah.
Um, Carl, that's been a fantastic conversation, really, really insightful. And to anyone who's listening, if you want to reach out to Carl to discuss any opportunities you might see in this space, because there's definitely a commercial opportunity and something actually that the market is looking for, that we're all looking for. Carl, thank you so much for joining me. A pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks for having me.